Now, we interviewed Seth Tibbett, the founder of Tofurky, a few weeks ago, and he agreed that success should be measured by how much good you can do in the world with the money you make. Businesses must stop trading in misery and embrace ethical practices, I believe. But many feel ethics and record profits can't generate a sexy bottom line, that it won't allow them to be accountable to shareholders, and that the two are mutually exclusive of one another unless they're simply paying lip service or humane washing. How can we shift their thinking?
The best way is to simply tell them that that assertion is profoundly wrong. It is absolute nonsense. It is just not true. For example, I don't know if you have this in Canada, companies, employees of companies sometimes have a week when they can bring their kids into work.
Oh yeah, bring your kid to work day, we call it. Yeah.
Now, I often ask people, if you had your son or your daughter sitting alongside you making your decisions, would that affect the way in which you behave during the day? Now, just imagine you had your name on the building. Would that change any of the decisions you made? Or look at it another way. Let's say I could give you a guaranteed way that your company's name or your family's name would never be on the front page of the newspaper alongside the word environmental damage or cruelty or recklessness or vandalism. I could inoculate you completely. It would never ever happen to you. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing for you? Would you like it? And of course the answer is yes. Now, if I said to you, what if I could show you a way that your company, your organization will always be seen in the public's eye as one that is ethical, that encourages the best people with the best practices for the best long-term good for all the stakeholders, not just the shareholders? Would that be a good thing? And the answer is yes. Okay, well, if that's the case, everyone understands the logic about why having a vegan world is important. For financial reasons, environmental reasons, cruelty reasons, the health reasons. It's endless. Suppose your organization had all those qualities. What effect do you think it would have on your weighted average cost of capital? Would it go up or down? What effect would it have on your ability to attract the best people? Would you attract better people or worse people as a result of that? What do you think it would do to the cost or to the attractiveness of your shares on the stock market? Would they go up or down?
You're speaking their language there.
I ask these rhetorical questions, and I tell the CEOs and the executives happen to be in the boardroom at the time, anybody who gets the wrong answer ought to be fired on the spot.
Beautiful.
And that tends to get their attention.
Yeah.
So establishing an organization which has all these ethical qualities embedded in the character and the culture of the enterprise adds value to the enterprise. And the advantage is it just doesn't affect your share price. It affects the health of your employees. I mean, what company, what industry, for want of a better word, produces a product that kills its own customer? The meat and dairy industry, that's one. What industry, for example, egregiously damages our environment or releases tons of CO2 into the atmosphere and poisons our oceans with dead zones? It's the meat and dairy industry.
Which affects all of us.
Exactly. Exactly. I say this, milk is the new asbestos and meat is the new tobacco. They've got no place in civilized society.
Yeah, it's amazing how these huge industries can program us, even with all of the restrictions in our freedoms and social distancing and being obligated to wear masks and the huge impact on the economy. People are, for the most part, willing to comply. But then you mentioned the connection between pandemics and the animals on our plates, and that we could avoid future outbreaks by them going vegan. People lose their bloody minds.
I think it's about time that activists and vegetarians and vegans stop being so diffident. We've got to get on the front foot and stand up more sternly. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a few committed people can change the world. Indeed, that's the only thing that ever has. There are only 13 million Jews in the world, but look at the number of Nobel Prizes they win every year. Trix and I sat in the stadium, the Olympic Games in Sydney, full of pride, as Australia, with a population less than Florida, won more medals in every country in the world, with the exception of the United States and Russia.
Nice.
Tibet's population is only 3 million, but who hasn't heard of the plight of the Tibetan? But there are over 600 million vegetarians and vegans in the world, and that is bigger than the United States, England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all put together. If we were one nation, we would be bigger than the 27 nations of the European Union. We are bigger than NATO. We are bigger than OPEC. And despite this massive demographic footprint, we are still drowned out by the raucous hunt and shoot and killing cretins who believe that violence is the answer when it should not even be a question.
Exactly.
So we've got to get on the front foot.
You're very passionate about this, which leads me to one of my favorite questions to ask individuals. When you were a little child, were you a child that loved animals?
Yes.
Did that affect your connection at a later date when you realized the disparity in actions and feelings?
To some extent they did, but it was very selective. I think like most people, we were speciesists. We loved dogs and cats and birds and squirrels and animals like that. But we still ate animals from other species. Yeah. As you probably know, I grew up in India under the setting sun of the British Raj. And they were departing, and they left some of their practices behind because our family originally came from that part of the world. But our family decided to stay on. And in those days, it was considered a rite of passage for a young man to be taken out into the jungle to kill his first panther. And you'd be taken out with a guy called a shikari, who's a Hindi word for a hunter who knew the jungle. And of course, my turn came, and I was taken out in a car with a shikari early in the morning. And for several hours of driving, we landed up in a village and stopped in the village market where the shikari entered into a bargain to buy a little kid goat. And that goat was to be used as bait. They put the little kid into my lap in the back seat and continued the journey into the jungle to the confluence of two small rivers and streams. And there was a tree alongside it, and the villagers had erected a thing called a machan. It's a platform. And the little goat was sitting in my lap, trembling in fear, absolutely petrified, and with those big, big, beautiful eyes. And she urinated warmly in my lap. Anyway, we got there, and I scrambled to the top of this machan, and they tied up this little goat at the bottom of the tree till night came, and they waited for the panther to arrive. And I could hear the bleating of this little animal. And sure enough, sooner or a little later, the panther did arrive, and I could hear her scouting around the tree. And I was told, lift up the gun, focus on the goat down below who was still crying, acclimatize your eyes to the darkness in the moonlight, and get ready to take the shot. And all I could remember were tears running down my eyes. I felt like I was drowning and having an asthma attack at the same time. And I was sobbing, and my hands were trembling. And bear in mind, I was a young boy, probably 13 or 14 years old, I guess. And I was a shaking mess. Of course, the panther heard me and didn't come down for the goat. Ooh. Of course, the shikari took away the rifle from me and looked at me in disgust. And there would be no killing of a panther there that night for me, or for me on any other night either. But on the way home, by the time we got back home, word had spread that Philip Wollen had turned out to be a sissy. And for a young man like that in a macho community, that was a pretty tough thing to cope with. Yeah. And that's why I think I became very interested in boxing. Always keen to step into the ring with a bigger opponent, and if one wasn't available, to box the instructor, and hopefully he would give me a bloody nose, and I would tell my seconds not to wipe it off my shirt. I was overcompensating to show that I wasn't scared to shed blood or my own blood for that matter. So it was a foolish thing to do for a young boy. But I think the seeds of that experience sort of affected me once I decided to get off the meat and dairy drug and understand this ghastly industry. These memories came back to me.
That would be more my definition of a real man who, did what you did later on in life. It's truly one of the best feelings in the world to be spending your life with someone who's so completely on the same page as you ethics-wise and who really gets you. How did you meet your lovely bride, Trix, and how would you describe her?
I decided I was never going to get married, and of course, over the years, I've had lots of girlfriends, but never wanted to get married.
Yeah.
Until I met Trix, and that was the smartest, wisest thing that I ever did. I wish it had happened 20 years earlier.
You may not have appreciated it then.
But perhaps not. But we play the cards we're dealt. I am the luckiest of all men. I don't think life would have been as fulfilling or as joyful without her, and I cannot imagine a single moment without her.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. I started sticking up for animals when I was just a toddler, and to be honest, insects are my first love in this world. And ever since I can remember, I've been wishing on birthday candles, shooting stars, and God, even turkey wishbones. So there's some disconnect for you, that people stop hurting animals. What's your wish when you blow out the candles on your cake?
I long for the day when people like you and I are redundant, when they don't need us. A day when we don't need animal rights activists, where the idea of hurting an animal would be such an anathema to every human being, nobody would accept it.
On that note, highly intelligent people are, victims of indoctrination, just like everyone else. A lot of brilliant people can have even more cognitive dissonance and be willfully ignorant than the average person. Why do you think that's the case?
Part of the reason, I think, is this. We have memories of our childhood when we were babes in the arms being carried by our mum, and we were fed meat and chicken and dairy and fish and all that kind of stuff. And we associate the foods that they eat today with comfort and security in the loving arms of our mum. And it sort of gets hardwired into our system that this is part of us. There is nothing intrinsically tastier or more valuable in a chicken or a dog, for example, or a cow or a cat. As I traveled around for many years in my job, I noticed that there were lots of species I didn't eat. Dogs and cats, horses or hamsters, bears or rats. I didn't eat any of them. So I simply added 5 more species to the list. Mm-hmm. That is sheep, cows, and pigs, and fish, and poultry. It was that simple. Simply by taking 5 species off the menu, I was already a vegan for 2,000 species. I just added 5 more. And once that penny dropped, I thought, this is such a BGL, a blinding glimpse of the obvious. I just dropped them off and I've never looked back. And I think this is true about most intelligent people. They associate the food that they eat with the safest, most pleasant, caring times of their lives. And it's very hard to get that tradition, that habit, to be broken.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not a rational one. If it was possible to sit down and have a rational conversation, everyone would be vegan. But it's not a rational decision. It is something that's it's a habit. It's a cultural thing, and they are very difficult to eliminate. And those facts have nothing to do with intelligence.
True.
Absolutely.
With all of the atrocities we inflict on other species, Do humans, the virus that we are, sorry, even have the right to exist on this planet if we refuse to smarten up?
Oh, I agree. But people, I remember giving a speech at a very big place here in Melbourne called Federation Square. After it was over, it was a very powerful speech and a lot of people were crying. And it was a high profile one with champagnes and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean. Anyway, after it was over, a very attractive young woman with beautiful dress and stiletto heels and a glass of champagne came up to me and said, I painted a fairly grim picture. You know, by 2048, all our fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth. And you would know that oceans sequester more CO2 than all the forests of the world put together. Now, if any of these algorithms are correct, and they all are, it means that no child under the age of 5 is ever going to reach retirement age. It's a mathematical impossibility. And that was basically the thesis of the talk that I gave some years ago to this particular group. Anyway, this lovely woman came up to me. By this stage, she'd had a few too many champagnes, and she came up to me and said, she called me a nasty word. She said, I don't know how you could give a speech like that. Today I decided to give up smoking, and now I think, what the hell is the point? And I'm not going to now, and it's your fault.
Me.
Exactly.
Wow.
So there's a fairly dire thing happening. We've got, so let me tell you, in India, we've got so many projects down there. We've got 55 projects right across the country, starting in Chandigarh, going all the way down south to Mysore. And with COVID, for example, you have day laborers who hardly earn any money, who are not getting paid. And many of them are having to walk 400 kilometers back home with no money and no food.
Oh my God.
So many suicides on the way, people hanging themselves or drowning themselves in wells. India's going to have a serious problem with water. You know, I remember as a young Boy Scout, I drilled my first bore well when I was a teenage Boy Scout. Now, you know that aquifers that took millions of years to fill are now running dry.
Oh, that's crazy.
Well, as a Boy Scout, I drilled this well, and we struck sweet water at 80 feet. We've recently constructed an orphanage nearby, and at 800 feet, we're sucking mud. In China, and let's remember, China has the world's best engineers and hydrologists. At 3,000 feet, the drill head is still dry. Water is the new oil. Nations will soon be going to war over it. And of course, you probably know all this. The Colorado River and the Rio Grande, the Indus, the Yellow Rivers, now frequently no longer reach the sea. They've been sucked dry by the meat and dairy industry. Crazy. 4 billion people today suffer from water scarcity. Now, why do I even mention it? Because it takes 50,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilo of beef, 1,000 liters of water to produce 1 liter of milk, and a dairyman makes 24 cents a liter for it. What a preposterously stupid industry. Mad Hatter economics on steroids. And today, 1 billion people are hungry. 20 million people will die this year from malnutrition. Cutting meat by only 10% will feed 100 million people, and going vegan will end malnutrition forever.
We need to get off that meat teat, that's for sure.
Exactly. And food prices as a consequence of all this are skyrocketing. It used to cost me $197 a ton for Thai rice for the projects in Southeast Asia. And then it went up to $1,015 a ton, a 5-fold increase in 5 months. And 4 countries now sell their grain to the West for hard currency, whilst their own children starve in their arms, and the West feeds it to livestock. So we can eat a steak. I bet I'm not the only one who sees this as a crime. And I often say, you know, every morsel of meat we eat is slapping the tear-stained face of a hungry child.
Yeah,
absolutely.
When I look into her eyes, do I remain silent? If everyone ate a Western diet, we'd need at least 2 planet Earths to feed us. We've only got 1, and she's dying.
yeah, smarten up.
Yeah.
That's it.
The Earth could produce enough food for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
So I have, on a little bit lighter note, a question that I like to ask all of my guests. By being vegan, you increase your likelihood of being on a deserted island by approximately 800 to 900%. And with you will be a mysterious companion pig.
Yep.
Now, we know that it's going to happen because we're all vegans.
Yep.
If somehow magically I could get you one meal, your favorite meal, and I can get it airlifted to you. I can't figure out how to get you off of the island, but I can get one meal to you every day. Your companion pig gets their own choice. What would the meal be?
Well, there's a dish that Trix made, and it's got rice and beans and peas and carrots and spices, and I love it. In fact, I could eat it every day of the week. It doesn't even have a name. It's something she's concocted. So, and speaking of it, if I lived on a desert island as a vegan, I already do. I live in Australia.
True enough.
I'll just make sure that we have your ways to contact you or people if they want to follow your initiatives. kindnesstrust.com. YouTube, you have a Kindness Trust channel, and then on surprise, Facebook, Kindness Trust. So
I'm so embarrassed to tell you, I still live in the 14th century.
okay.
Our website, Trix made several years ago. It hasn't been updated for 5 years.
I'm cool with that.
Our Facebook is in my name personally. I barely know how to use that.
Facebook is my speed. I don't go beyond Facebook. So thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you again for taking some time to be on the show. It was greatly appreciated. We really had a wonderful time speaking.
Thank you, Stu. Thanks, Alex. Take good care.
You
Take
too.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Mwah.